Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, What is New in Recent Releases 6.1 and 6.2 of TopBraid EDG. Let me start by introducing you to today's speakers. We have Robert Coyne. Robert is the CMO here at Top Quadrant, and Robert will be providing a brief introduction, talking through how TopBraid EDG is a knowledge graph for data governance, and how it is designed to provide comprehensive, modular, and extendable data governance capabilities. We'll then go into a demo in which Irene Polikoff, CEO of Top Quadrant, will demo these new features. We'll have a brief poll, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. Before we get started, let's review a few logistical items. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel, and you should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during today's presentation. We will address as many of those questions as time allows at the conclusion of the demo. We will also be recording today's webinar, and we'll send a link to that recorded version. Thank you, and with that, we'll hand it over to Robert to get us started. Robert?
Hello, everyone. And thanks, Christy. Many of you are familiar with Top Quadrant and are probably users or prospective users of TopBraid EDG. This kind of webinar is pretty self-selective in that regard. But I want to go over just a little background on our company and TopBraid EDG before we go into the demo. Top Quadrant was founded in that same year that the article on the vision of the semantic web was published in Scientific American by Tim Berners-Lee, Professor Jim Hendler, and Ora Lassila. And ever since then, we've been engaged in applying this technology to create enterprise applications and to make enterprise information meaningful. The technology has been variously known as semantic technology, semantic web, linked data, and possibly some other things that you know of. More recently, it has become more widely known as knowledge graph technology. Starting in 2015, we've created TopBraid EDG using that technology. The scope and definition of data governance continues to evolve and expand, and it encompasses many traditional IT-driven activities and tools, for instance, for data quality, data catalog, and many other things that IT has always done for data management. But the bigger, and some say revolutionary change that data governance brings is that it must be business-driven. Business now owns the data and is responsible for realizing its value, for better or for worse. Some initial data governance offerings have focused on mainly the technical IT side of data management, what some call bottom-up tasks, while others have focused on top-down tasks such as establishing glossaries of business terms. These have been recognized as very useful but insufficient. The next wave, sometimes called Data Governance 2.0, recognizes that data governance must span and be able to integrate and connect all of these. For instance, connecting business terms with corresponding data elements in database tables. The triangle here illustrates Top Quadrant's view of the comprehensive nature of data governance and what informs our strategic roadmap of enhancing TopBraid EDG's capabilities. So up top here, we have the executive concerns, which include things like business policies, rules, data governance roles. Representative concerns encompass the large and growing number of information asset types and their properties, et cetera. The applied focus, this is really the bottom line, the business reasons for doing data governance, such as analytics, lineage, or regulatory compliance and other things. All of these aspects must be connectable. Fortunately, these requirements are a very good fit for knowledge graph technology. So EDGE was designed to support data governance. It can represent metadata and data, models that give meaning to the data, and rules and other semantic layers or aspects as needed. And these are all connectable. EDGE can be viewed as a large collection of modular graphs for specific purposes, for example, particular ontologies or taxonomies. or it can be coalesced, seen as coalesced into a single data governance knowledge graph. That's really the power of this technology. Edge provides a lot of structure as a substantial predefined platform for an enterprise to represent their enterprise information, its connections, and to implement their data governance processes. This approach is comprehensive, flexible, and extendable, and we believe that knowledge graphs are the best way to support integrated data governance, top-down, bottom-up, and middle-out. In that regard, TopBraid EDG includes definitions for over 100 types of assets, such as glossary terms, database tables, ETL scripts, and many others, some of which are shown in this illustration. An asset can be any technical, business, or operational resource governed by an organization that uses TopBraid EDG. Asset collection types, that's our term, are types of knowledge graphs in TopBraid EDG stored as named graphs in the Edge repository. Specifically, there are ontologies that describe the predefined asset types packaged with TopBraid EDG, ready to be used. Edge users, of course, can customize these definitions. It can also create their own ontologies to formally describe data they want to capture in Edge. Information about assets is grouped into meaningful domains or collections according to the asset type. And these different types of assets and different types of collections help to focus and manage data governance tasks. With Edge, you can start from several different data governance packages, which are modular combinations of asset collections types that work together to support a comprehensive but staged approach to data governance. Over here on the left, you see the main navigation bar of Edge that you'll see when Irene starts her demo. You see many the asset collection types listed here, which can look pretty complex, especially when one starts using Edge. But what a user will see really depends on the license package or packages they are working with, and this can be configured. And customers can easily add their own new types of assets. So we're going to go over to Irene's demo very soon, but before that, I just want to note that we're doing this webinar and demo because we've been asked to. Each release introduces substantial new capabilities, and many people have asked us for an overview when a release comes out so they can inform their ability to use all of the power in Edge. This slide and the next one list the new or enhanced features that Irene will be covering from releases 6.1 and 6.2 collectively. They're not listed in any particular order, nor are they intended to be grouped for this type of webinar into meaningful data governance scenarios or workflows. It's just not really feasible in this type of demo, where Irene will be ranging across many specific capabilities. So you may have seen or may want to view other webinars on TopBraid EDG where we demonstrate how capabilities are used together to support real-world data governance tasks, such as the several day-in-the-life webinars and webinars on Lineage from last year. There are many more. There's a link to all of our past webinars and other resources in a couple of the slides at the end of this deck. The new capabilities then are just listed here as a reference, and this whole slide set will be made available to you and all registrants along with the recording of this webinar. And the release notes at the bottom here lists all the new features that are available in both of these releases. We'll also make available the files that Irene is using today, along with a README file with the steps for uploading that into TopBraid EDG. So you can continue exploring these new capabilities on your own if you want. Finally, all Edge enhancements are driven from the broad view of data governance we have, as illustrated in that data governance triangle I showed earlier. Some of these you'll see today, and some of what you will see today are UI user experience enhancements of existing capabilities. Irene will be commenting as she goes along on why a feature has been added or enhanced. And with that, we'll be turning it over to Irene now for the demo.
All right, so I'm showing a homepage of TopBraid EDG, and as Robert was saying, you see here in this navigation bar on the left all the different types of asset collections. Majority of them are based on some already predefined model for glossaries, or predefined model for data assets, etc. But sometimes our customers want to create a completely different new category of things. And that has always been available if you license custom asset collection types. But that requires some setup in TopBraid Composer. Because some people, wanted to have some quick access to a place to store instances for some arbitrary ontology, we introduced something called data graph. So unlike all these other asset collection types, data graph is based entirely on your own ontologies. And I have created one called release items, and that's what I'm going to use throughout the demo to show new features, so just to keep me focused on the kind of features that I want to show. The way you create a new data graph, you just click on this button and you give it a name, and then you say what ontology you want to base it on. So you'll see the selection of ontologies that are available in your environment. I've based my data graph on this release plan ontology that I have previously created. So that's all you need to create a place to store some data for your knowledge graph that may have master data or may have some other category of data that's that has not yet been modeled here. And just to show you how it looks like, my ontology for the capture of release items is actually very simple. You have a release item, a set of different properties relating those items, so connecting them to type of user or type of category. So let me go back and take a look at those items that I want to discuss with you today. So they come from various releases, either 6.1 or 6.2. And by the way, this is also a new feature, I think came in 6.1, that the table that shows you resources in a given connection is editable. So you don't necessarily have to go to the form to edit. You could get the column that you want in this table and edit directly in place as you would with the spreadsheet with Excel. Quite a number of enhancements that we have done are related to the form displays. So let me focus on some of them, and you see quite a number. So let's take a look at how the new forms or updated forms look like. So one of the new features is that you could see not only fields that have values, but also fields that currently don't have values. This is switchable on and off, and your preferences, the user preference, will be remembered. So here I'm switching it off, so now I'm only seeing populated fields, as it was prior to 6.2, but it tells me that there are 3 more properties that are not populated, and I could switch to see them. And the advantage of that is, first of all, that provides you a quick way to see all the available fields, but that also gives you a way to edit inline, which people like quite a bit. You could still click on the edit button and edit all of the fields, in the edit form at the same time, but this inline editing is something that people like quite a bit. So, I mean, it's not gonna make sense what I'm doing right now, but gives you an idea how you could add values now through inline editing to the fields that don't currently have values. Another nice new feature is the Wikidata kind of preview, and that lets you look at have a quick preview of the item without necessarily clicking on it. Previously, what we showed was just the URI, and the URI is not necessarily that meaningful to the user. So what we're showing right now, in addition to the URI, is what graph it's defined in. So this is defined in the graph we are in the release items, but it could have some other home asset collection, and then a short description. You could also see a nested form like this. So again, this lets you stay on one form without necessarily navigating into another, and that's something that our users find helpful. Here is an interesting feature that has to do with having different views into the same resource. If I click here, you see that I have another view called Release Item Summary View. And if I were to switch to it, you see much less information than in a full view. So this lets you define different views for different types of users, because those views can be associated with a user. Let's say you may want to have a complete view of the data asset for the data steward, but maybe only summary and abbreviated view for a subject matter expert that doesn't have all the technical details. So that's possible now, and let me show you how you build those views. So if you go into the ontology, you could select a class. So here I already have a class selected, a release line item. And if you want to build a new view into it, you would go and click on this gear button and select derive view shape. And that will create a new node shape that is derived from this class. So I'm gonna call it demo view. And on this, I could pick which properties to expose to this view. So let's say I'm gonna unclick anything but this 3 and say okay. And that's basically all I needed to do. I could group them differently. I could associate them with the governance roles for which this is a default view. But essentially, that's the basic setup that's necessary. So now if I am to refresh this form, I will see this demo view now. This view is, the scope of the view is all members of the class from which it was derived, and it can be used in APIs and queries, not just on a form. So it's another useful new feature. Let me see. Some of the maybe less minor yet important features, less major but yet important features, have to do with how validations are displayed. If there are some validation issues that would be indicated by this button, and we don't have any right now, they will be displayed directly under the field that has a problem. Previously, they were all displayed at the end, so it was harder for the user to see which particular field had the problem, but now they're going to be displayed directly under the field. And you could switch between the traditional kind of section-based form to the folders form. And this is quite useful if you have a heavy form with lots of section and lots of information. Obviously, I don't have that now here, but if I switch to some other example, let's say Northwind, those forms have a lot of information. And click on one of the columns. You see that there's lots of sections. So you could switch between a view that you currently have like this and a view that has different folders and organizing information according to folders. This selection is again specific to the user. So each user could set those preferences for himself and they get remembered. And then if they change their mind, they click the button and that choice is also sticky and gets remembered. And on the performance side, you will also see that these forms that we have upgraded much faster. And in the sample that I'm using, where there are just 5 or 6 entries, the difference would not be noticeable. But if you have a heavy form, and I know that some of you do, where there are 30, 40, 50, 60 values populated on the form, you'll see quite a noticeable performance. It's still gonna open up in 1 or 2 seconds, irrespective of how much data is on the form. So let me go back to my item. And one other feature that I want to show for the form is about dynamic inferencing, dynamically inferring new data from the existing data. And let's see, feature it is. Yeah, dynamic inferencing, you'll see it described here. And we have a documentation about how it works on the website. That's in a page called Inferring Data with Shackle Property Value Rules that you could look at, but I will show how it works, how you could set up inferences. So let's create a new property in the ontology, which value will not be entered by the user, but rather will be dynamically calculated, inferred by the system at runtime. So I'm going to create a new property. I'm going to call it count release numbers. And I'm going to make it an integer. And what I want to do with this property, because some of the features I actually updated not in one release, but in multiple releases. So for each feature, I want to calculate in how many releases it was enhanced. So far I created the property shape, and when I go to it, I have a way to create something called property value rule. And I could use a template for doing it, or I could just enter a rule sort of manually. It's easier to do it based on a template, and we have a number of templates pre-populated. So here I'm gonna pick count number of property values, and I'm gonna use the release and count the number of release values. And that creates a rule for me. So you could see this graphically, how it works. It says, all right, we're going to take the value of release, count how many, and then populate it into this property. So that's all I needed to do to set up Inference. And now if I go here and let's see, I think I need to count release numbers. You see it appeared here. There's one release number, And one different thing about this property is that it's not editable because it's inferred. There are also other options with this dynamic inferencing. You could set up something called default values, where the system will initially populate it, but user could still override it. So there will be initial inferencing, but it will be editable. And once you override it, then that default value will no longer be calculated. But I just did the straight inferencing. And if we go here and look at, let me find something that has two release numbers. Yeah, increase scope of lineage. So you see that this has been calculated as 2. So that's a very useful feature because, you know, sometimes you want to derive some value from the available values. And this is not only available on forms. This is available for queries, for APIs. So it's available in not just when you look at the Edge UI, but it's a core built-in feature that you could leverage in communicating with Edge as well. Another interesting feature for which we have a web page describing it is integration with external knowledge graphs. So increasingly, other organizations provide information in a form of knowledge graphs. Wikidata is one example, but there are also quite a number of others. And the advantage of it and the benefits of it, because they're all based on standards, you could now connect to those knowledge graphs and get data about your resources or resources of interest to you without necessarily managing it yourself. One example can be, well, in this example, you have some famous people about which Wikidata has information. Another example that you could see in TopBraid EDG samples is geographical entities. So you may not necessarily want to manage all the names or need to manage all the names of countries, states, cities, or their latitude and longitude information. Maybe you want to take advantage of external knowledge graphs and have them manage that information. And then you bring that information in for your own use as needed. So let me show you how you may be able to do that. Now, with our release items, of course, there's not going to be anything in external knowledge graphs about the kind of features that we have in Edge, but I am going to try to show you how to do it with geography data, because for geography, of course, there is information available in external knowledge graphs. So to do that, I'm going to go to geography ontology and first set up connection to the external graph. Let me go to, let's say, state. And all right, well, it's already set up here. So let me delete it for now, so I could show to you from scratch how to do that. So I want to create a link for states to resources in Wikidata that have information about state. So let me create a property, and I'm going to call it Wikidata link. All right, and that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to go to this property shape, and again, I'm going to go to the gear menu, and make this property a Wikidata link. Now, what happens as a result of it? Because actually this feature is not limited to just Wikidata. What you need to do is provide the endpoint for where to connect to. And what this handy menu item does is simply populates, makes this value an IRI and populates the endpoint for the Wikidata. But if you're trying to link to some graph that's not Wikidata but something else, what you need to do is to enter a different value here. That's all. So once it's populated, TopBraid Edge will now be able to take a look at, let's say, states, because I've defined it for states, and find matching states in Wikidata. That's all I needed to do this setup. Now the actual data is in the geography taxonomy. So I'm going to go to the geography taxonomy now, and you could I could go to a state, and, New York State, for example, and I think find suggestions. Find suggestions here, or I could go and suggest matching Wikidata entities. All right, so it found one suggestion. Or I could go to transform and run suggestions for all the assets or for all instances of some class. In this case, I'm going to do for instances of state. Okay, and it's going to now go through all 57 states that I have and try to find matches to them on Wikidata. And once it goes through all the states, it will produce a report with suggestions. And you see that there is some confidence associated with it, and I could slide the slider, for example, to get the confidence to 100%, and I could apply my suggestions and see the link that was generated to the Wikidata resource, as you could see here. Now, so with those links established, probably what you want to do is actually get some data about those resources. And how you do that is described in detail here. So the next step for you is to go ahead and after the linking has been established, is define which properties from the Wikidata you want to get. And here you get some pretty detailed instructions for doing this. There is an option, add property shape from Wikidata, and you enter ID of, in our case, this would be ID of the state. So you would enter something like this, and then a possible properties to use will be given to you, and you pick which properties you want to populate it from the external knowledge graph, and the values will be copied. So, I mean, we have a lot to show. That's why I'm trying to go somewhat quickly. But basically, that's I mean, that's a sequence that you would go through, described in detail here to get your values. So go to state and add property shape from Wikidata sample. get this ID, and it's going now out to Wikidata and finds out what kind of properties it has for states, and gives me a list of properties that I may be interested in, like a short name. So once I've added that, then through the matches, those values will be added to my knowledge graph from the external knowledge graph, and they could be continuously refreshed by Edge. So I'm not gonna go through that. Though, let me show you one last thing on the forms that may be of interest. I think in 6.1, we introduced the source code panel. The source code panel is allows folks to see RDF serialization of the data in Edge. And it's also editable. Now, this is clearly a very technical, highly advanced feature. You could, at the server level, configure it to show it or not to show it. In 6.2, you have an option to configure it for specific roles. So some users of Edge would be able to see that, and some users would not be able to see that. That's, again, something that we have been asked for by users. All right, I think I've covered majority, or although not every, have been implemented for resource shapes. Let me switch to something else and show you new options, a few other new options. By the way, when you're looking at the collections themselves, you're now seeing a new display that is a tabular display and with different columns. This navigation bar is consistently available throughout, no matter what page or screen you're on, you have access to it. And you could easily search and refine right here. And that's going to be quite useful. I know that some of our customers now have maybe several hundreds of collections of the same type, and this display is going to be not only much faster, but also easier for them to filter and navigate to get to the right information that they need. What I'm going to show next is something on lineage models. And there's been a lot of work on lineage for both 6.1 and 6.2. Work on expanding the scope of lineage, what kind of lineage information shown, how is it shown, etc. I don't have here an example of lineage, but another nice new feature is that now with your Edge comes a built-in tutorial for lineage. And in this tutorial, you could explore various capabilities of the lineage, take a look at the example of the lineage model, see what's covered in it. The link types themselves, there are now different types of links, and depending on the type of link, you will see different information. So there's different derivation maps that are available. So let me close out of here. And you could see business activities now in the lineage map. You will also see business terms on the lineage map. Previously, it was only application and data sources. But now the scope of the lineage has, as I said, significantly increased. And if you want to see exactly what information is shown, you could click in the tutorial on this icons link, and you see these are all the entities, all the objects that are being shown and as a part of the lineage. So you see business activities, business areas, capabilities, functions, terms, as well as the things like data elements and databases that were available, logical entities, so much, even people, stakeholders, and how they get involved with data. So much expanded scope of the lineage. And then different link types are available that are based on the types of information that is an edge. And this is the iconology for the type of links. So some of the links are showing direct values, other links are actually inferred links where edge calculates the relationship based on the underlying data. So nice tutorial for you to take a look at and get more familiar with lineage information. And what else do I want to show? By the way, that graph with the new features and Ontology, it's based on, I think we'll make it available for download so you could play with it. Each feature has a description associated with it, so you could take a look at it more. There's well over 60 features. So of course I can't go through all of them, and I want to leave some time for questions. Some important things to mention is important for some of our users that asked for it is URI construction rules. You could always add your new URI construction rules. The default is label. But prior to 6.1, this required some coding. In 6.1, we introduced a number of other options for you to select, like UUID or generated sequence number. Christy, has something happened? Have I lost the presenter ability?
No.
Because
For a couple of minutes, I couldn't view your screen, so I just made you presenter again, Irene. So it's showing.
Okay, all right. So I just had made presenter pop up, so I hope that I wasn't just talking and not showing anything. If that happened, where I was showing the lineage tutorial, and the way you get to the lineage tutorial is you click on Lineage Models, and even if you don't have any Lineage Models, there is a link for tutorial, and there you could explore an example of the lineage model and see various information. So this is where I was at. And then I was talking about URI construction rules, and they are in 6.1, you now are able to set them at the server level for all asset collectors. And in 6.2, they are also enabled for different construction rules per asset collection. And the way you do that, you go to the Manage tab, and you could pick different construction methods. So pre-built, a label, UUID, counter, there are a few other options, and then you could plug in your custom one. So we made it easy to plug in different ways to construct URIs for resources in Edge. And one other thing that I want to cover before we go to questions is has to do with Search the Edge. So that's another thing where people like Search the Edge a lot, where you could search across all asset collection. But one issue with it has been that there was a setup required for facets, to declare facets. And I even had the video where I explained how to do that. And after I did the video, we looked at it and we thought, well, that's quite a bit of work. Can we just pre-calculate facets so that if users set up them, they could still set them up, but if they don't, then the system provides facets for them. So let me show you how you do that. And by the way, in order to include an asset collection in Search the Edge index, you set it on creation, or you could do it later on the Manage tab. This is what I'm doing now. And since I want to wait, I am going to Server Administration Console, and there are a number of new features here as well. But one of them I could, rebuild the index, and we've got working now. And you could see that now I'm searching over this asset collection, and I did nothing to declare these facets. They've been calculated for me based on the available data. So these are the most populated facets for the release items, like category, etc. So you could still do your custom configurations, but Edge will try to guess what facets should be available, and different facets are provided for different data. So of course, if I'm working with glossary terms, the kind of properties that I'm using would be different than from release items. Or if I'm working with data elements, again, it has different properties. And Edge will take that all into account and provide the most relevant facets automatically. Okay, with that, hopefully I left enough time for the questions. I'm switching.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we're going to take a couple of seconds here and do a couple of brief polls. We have 3 quick questions, so if you wouldn't mind voting on these, that would be great. I'm going to launch the first one. So everyone should be able to see a quick poll on their screen. The poll is, I am interested in attending TopBraid user group sessions. So if you could please choose, yes or no, if you're interested or not in attending these types of sessions, that would be great. Looks like most of you are submitting, so I will go ahead and close out that poll. It looks like most of you are interested in attending these types of sessions. So with that said, let's go to the second poll. You should see a question on your screen. I will be able to present in these sessions about my use of Edge. So if you'll take a second and choose yes or no, or whether or not you would be able to present in any of these sessions. So another second or two. Okay. It looks like a majority of you would not be able to. There are some, so thank you for that. And then the last poll question you should see on your screen is, I would want to present but may not be able to get management permission. So if you can take a second. All right, it looks like most of you have voted. And yes, so many of you would not be able to get management permission for that. So thank you for taking the time to share your response there. I think now we could probably move on to questions. If you haven't already, please take a minute and submit your questions and discussion points in the question box located on the right-hand side control panel. I think we've already started to get a few, so let's go ahead and start. We'll start with this question. I think, Robert, this may be for you. Are the governance roles, configured views, enforced? Are the governance role configured views enforced, or are they just default and someone in the role can still access other views? Robert, could you respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, for now, we've just made them default. In other words, someone in that role would still be able to go and get a full view if they want to. We want to get user input, customer input to see where we should go with this. If someone in their data governance process wants them to be enforced, that might be useful. I guess if it was a government customer, we'd have to call them redacted. Sorry, just a topical joke.
Okay, let's go to question 2. Here, Irene, this is for you. Irene mentioned the ID of a Wikidata state. In general, would this be the URI of an external instance?
Yes, so there could be two different questions. Yeah, so what I did first, I established a connection to the Wikidata by providing its Sparkle endpoint, and then in that property that I specified for establishing a connection, the matches are found, and if I accept the match, then the URI of the resource from that external source is put in the match. So that's one part of the answer. And then what I did then, I said, okay, after the matching, we may want to get some data about those matching resources. But what data? In Wikidata, there are lots of data about each of the resources, and some of them may not be of interest to us. So we want to select which property values to, and in order to select that property values, I went to Wikidata, I went to state. This is a type of the resource that I'm interested in, and I got the ID of state, not state as not New York State, not Alabama or North Carolina, but state as a type that starts with a Q, and I use that in order to for Edge to give me a list of possible properties that Wikidata has for the state. So that ID is whatever the endpoint provides. It's a local name, so it's not the full URI. I don't need the full URI since I have the Sparkle endpoint connection. It's just the slug, the local name, the local ID in Wikidata for the class state.
Okay. Hopefully that answered your question. Let's go to the next question. Irene, I assume this is for you as well. I have just upgraded to 6.1.1 base version, ontologies, taxonomies, and crosswalks. I do not see a data graph option. Is this a separate package?
Yes, it's not a package, it's a module. It's an add-on module called custom data asset collection types. It's can be added to any package, and what that module gives you is two things. One, it gives you the data graph asset collection type, and two, it gives you ability to create your own asset collection types. So for example, if you wanted to define a new asset collection type, is already pre-selected ontology, is already pre-selected, configured options, let's say for customer master data or whatever. You could do that, and you also get this generic data graph thing.
Great, thank you, Irene. The next question we'll take. If the external knowledge graph source that you link to is not Wikidata, will the gear menu item still say Wikidata?
Yeah, so right. so the gear menu item, there's two menu items that we saw. One was to establish connection to the external graph, and that item says, you know, build connection to Wikidata, and it's just a convenience to show you by example what to do. As I said, all you need to do is put the value in this in a Sparkle endpoint, so you could just change it and do something else. If there's no links to Wikidata, then you're not going to see the item says that's in the data itself. You're not going to see the item establish connection to data. I don't think so. But that drop-down menu in the gear item is configurable anyhow. So you could have something appear in it of your choice. Explains how to configure those items so you have new items appearing. Let me take a look. Maybe I could pull some instructions for doing it so you get a more meaningful message there. It's a good question.
Okay, we may have time for another question. It would be helpful if you mentioned the version number and package options required for demonstrated functionality. I do not see many of the options that you're demonstrating. If you organize the demo by basic packages and which packages are required for each functionality that you are showing.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I said that we will make this data graph that I was using available for download, because the data graph actually has that information. It has a release number. It has the applicable asset collection, you know, what asset collection it applies to. So if you download, you should be able to see all of this. And by the way, if you have TopBraid Composer Maestro Edition and you could run Edge within that, and there you will see the graphs. So while if your server is not licensed data graphs, you could still use that sample in, when running in TopBraid Composer, and then you'll see that information. I struggled a bit about how to best organize this demo because there's so many features to show, and yeah, there are some of them that are specific to taxonomies, some specific to crosswalks, some specific to ontologies. Some has to do with server administration. Some are applicable everywhere. So in the end, I've kind of focused on, you know, forms in the beginning and all the different things you could do with forms, and then showed a little bit of other things. But there are definitely more than one way to organize this kind of presentation. And hopefully, when you look at the file, you'll be able to use that to get the kind of information you're interested in.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you, Robert. It's getting pretty close to the hour, so we should probably go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. I know there were a few questions that we did not get to today, and we will be providing answers to those questions in the form of an email response to all attendees. You'll also be provided a link to the recorded presentation, as we've mentioned earlier. We hope you found today's information valuable, and thank you for your attention and interest, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.